We're on now.
All right. The meeting, we're going to call the meeting to order. John, you want to lead the pledge?
Yep.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Select Board will meet on the following dates. Regular meeting 6 p.m. November 23rd and December 14, 2009. Work sessions prior to the regular meetings will start at 5 p.m. Work session at 5 p.m. on November 16 and 30th and December 7th. All of the above meetings will be held in Town Hall unless otherwise posted. Weather observations for the month of October are posted in the front lobby at Town Hall. Town offices will be closed on Wednesday, November 11, 2009, in observance of Veterans Day. Public hearing at 6:30 tonight to discuss the forming of an energy commission. The new tax rate has been set at $18.74, which is an increase of 79 cents. I believe the bills are already in the mail. The rate was based on the school budget increased $381,000. The town budget decreased $72,000, and the net effect was a 79-cent increase in the tax rate.
Charlie, under that public hearing, 6:30 p.m., November 23rd, that's to discuss the forming of the Energy Commission. That's the 23rd, not tonight.
So the 23rd?
Yeah.
I thought I said the 23rd, or not, tonight's not the 23rd, is that what you're trying to tell me? Okay. All right. The minutes. I want to approve the minutes of the work session, October 26th. Does anyone have any comments? If not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the work session? Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the October 26th work session. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. The minutes of the October 26th regular meeting. Does anyone have any comments or changes they wish to make to those minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval. Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of October 26th board meeting. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. All right. Okay, we have, do you have any agenda review items and comments? We have no appointments tonight, Paul?
Nope.
So the 6:30 public hearing, we'll have to wait another 25 minutes.
Work around it. Just continue.
Yeah, we'll, correspondence. We have a letter from President Steen, PS University. Dear Select Board members, thank you for the prompt response to the Plymouth Police Department to support Plymouth State University during the alert last week. The cooperation between the departments and the large presence of the Plymouth Police Department made a significant difference in our students, faculty, and staff. In addition, we're grateful for the work by dispatchers Smith, Dunaway, and Woolley during the event. On behalf of the students, faculty, and staff, please accept our appreciation of Plymouth Police Department for this assistance. Sincerely, Sarah Jane Steen, President. That event was resolved, what? How long did it take to get that straightened out, Paul? Half a dozen hours? Were they?
I'd say around 5 or 6 hours, but the chief is here if you want more exact times.
Do you have any comments on it, Chief, you want to talk about?
I think the initial call came in about maybe 6:30, and I think around 10 p.m. we had identified and located this person of interest. In the meantime, we had searched all of the academic buildings, secured most of the dormitories, and checked all the areas around the campus as well.
Do you know how many police officers responded to that total? You had the PSU group and then...
I think we probably had about 30 police officers available to us during that time.
So it's town?
Local police, university police, we had the sheriff's department down here. State police was also assisting, and some of our neighboring agencies as well.
Okay. Thank you. We have no visitors on the agenda. Land use permits are available for review in the lobby of the Select Board office. Chairman's comments, other than the ones I've made on the tax rate, I think we, given what the state did in the way of reduced aid, close to $400,000, I'd say we did fairly well with the tax rate and maintained our reserves at about the level they were last year. There are no purchase orders. There are no new purchase orders. Committee reports.
I have nothing.
Valerie wasn't here.
I have nothing.
I had the Water District. It was a fairly uneventful meeting. We talked briefly about their offer to split the cost of an unmetered water source at the amphitheater. And the board hasn't. You were going to talk to the Recreation Department manager before we make a decision. I think the option to the town paying half of the fee would be that the fire department's going to have to get down there every time they have to water the lawn, and that's going to be a significant expense. So I think, we can probably resolve that tonight or at the next meeting. John?
The planning board was postponed because of no action necessary.
Darrell?
I met with Stuart Kroll from the Conservation Committee, and he let me know that his and another member's memberships we needed to vote to renew. I can't remember her name. We approved Lisa Donna last time, but Stuart Kroll and there's another standing member that I think we need to move to renew. Do you have that name at all? No.
Did you give it to the town clerk?
We started with her just to check on the status, and so we do need to renew those.
I'll find it. We'll do it at the next meeting.
Okay. That was
All right. I have one further comment. I was at the Rotary's penny sale, which was quite successful. They raised an estimated $14,000, which will go to scholarships for Plymouth High School graduates. They give a half a dozen fairly substantial scholarships. It was there were about 600 people attended the event, And they had teams of members selling tickets. I guess 6 or 8 teams sold something in the range of $1,000 to $1,500 each in tickets over the period of 5 different drawings. But again, it was a very, very successful night, and everybody was quite happy. All right, other business. Mr. Flanders, Baker River Watershed Association, to speak about updating the 2003 management plan. Dick, how are you?
I have a few members of our steering committee here present also with us tonight. You can see that. Should I turn this a bit?
Please.
So the board can actually see this?
There you go.
Does that work? You guys want to come up? Larry Cushman is the chairman of the Baker River Watershed Association from Romney. Kevin Hopkins is a member representing the town of Warren. Nellie Murray is a member representing the town of Wentworth. The other member of our steering committee is Molly Fuller, who is representing Wet Mountain National Forest. And we meet periodically. We're a group that was formed back in, I think it was 2001, to continue efforts toward protection of the Baker River watershed. In fact, just as a little background, I don't know if you've seen our brochure. I got a couple of copies of this. It's a little brochure we made available to the public. In fact, this copy is generally available outside for the public to pick up. It gives an overview of what the association is all about and what our goals are and so on. One of the things that we want to talk to you tonight, I know we have a brief amount of time to cover this, is the reference management plan that we did in 2003. I don't know whether the Newfoundland Lake Watershed Association came before this board or the planning board when they made their pitch relative to their watershed planning that they just wrapped up. But essentially, the Baker River Group had done something similar back in 2003. And, at a much smaller budget, we only had $12,000 that we got from DES to put together a management plan for the whole watershed versus, I think, the Newfoundland group got over $150,000 for their work. So they've got a much more extensive effort. Ours is more of a low-key, local initiative. And when we put this together, what essentially we did was went to each of the 4 main stem towns along the Baker River watershed, Plymouth, Romney, Wentworth, and Warren, and that was our initial focus. And we worked with the town boards to make the plan something that was their plan, not something brought to them and said, here, adopt it. So the recommendations and the goals in here are actually a reflection on the input we received from the local boards. In the case of Plymouth back in 2003, I think I actually met with the planning board at the time and not the then select board, and went through some concepts and so on that we wanted them to consider. One of the things in terms of what we do, you may be aware, you may not be aware, the Baker River group during the summertime, all of us as volunteers sample like 13 different locations on the Baker River for E. coli, and we also do specific conductance testing. We report our E. coli results to Tom Morrison as the health officer, and those are reported hopefully to you folks. And in the case of the Plymouth area, what I do, I personally do the sampling with the Plymouth, and we have a site at the Covered Bridge. That's the furthest upstream. I do the Tenny Mountain Highway Bridge, and I also do the so-called Silver Bridge before it discharges into the Pemmy River. It gives a pretty good sense water quality, and you're basically trying to answer the basic question, is it safe to swim? So that's one of the things that we do in the town of Plymouth, and thanks to your support, we get $200 allocated each year to support the water quality testing, which we do through Plymouth State University. But one of the things I wanted to show you on this, you get a sense of obviously that the town of Plymouth and the political boundaries of the town pretty irregular. But the actual watershed that we're focused on here, the Baker River Group, you can probably see it as this light green stipple line in through here. So we're interested in any impacts in development or any other things that might affect the Baker River as the drainage flows into the Baker River from either direction and obviously upstream as well. So that's pretty much our focus, as opposed to drainage, which of course the downtown mostly drains the Penny River. What we did back in 2003, and I don't know if you have copies of this or not, I'll pass this around. Basically, what we did was put together goals and objectives for each of the towns. And again, this reflects input from the public as well as the town. And we came up with a series of goals. There were 5 major goals that were outlined that we hope to achieve over a varying length of time. So we had individual goals on the left, first column on the left. Then we had the objectives within each of the goals, and those are identified here. And then we came up with a guesstimate of the timing. When are we actually going to hopefully get these individual elements addressed? It's not too dissimilar from what I see in the 2006 master plan for Plymouth. There's a whole series of things that you hope to achieve by a certain time frame. What I had added in the last month here was the last 2 columns, which is we really didn't identify originally who was responsible for implementing these goals and objectives. So I've added what I thought, in working with a steering committee, the people that would likely be the ones that we ought to be working with. And in the last column is the reason we're here tonight, is to kind of get a sense of the current status on some of these things. And given the time frame we have, we don't have a lot of time given the public hearing, I want to focus on just an opportunity for some input from you folks on things that specifically relate to the town fathers, the select board. And I'm looking in particular, for example, well, just to cover the first goal, increase public education and involvement. Who are we, what do we do? And I gave you an example of the brochure that we put together and updated in 2008 and distributed a whole series of copies in 2009. But if I skip to the meat of it on number 2, minimizing and controlling erosion, one of the objectives of that goal is item 3. Instituting local regulations to protect riparian zones. Those are the areas in particular fairly close to the main stem of the Baker River. And now we're meeting with each of the 4 towns, and we hope to do an update basically of the 2003 plan to get a sense as to what have we achieved in the last 6 years, what are our needs, and so on. And as you can see in the last column under item 3, I have listed, for example, things that we have done within Plymouth to protect the riparian zone. Well, we have the environmentally sensitive zone that was implemented that has certain controls, in this case within 500 feet of the Baker River, as well as Loon Pond, and of course it also pertains to the Pemmy, but that's not our focus. So there are some controls already in place, essentially, that would probably address some of the things that we were concerned about back in 2003. That's reflected, of course, in the zoning ordinance in the case of Plymouth. And interestingly, in the Baker River watershed, we're the only town with zoning. Is that right? So we're, quite a bit ahead in terms of some of these things like ordinances and overlay zones when you don't even have zoning in some of our member towns. So we have quite a disparity of perspectives on this. Skipping to page 2. One of the things that we wanted potential input on was under item 3, goal 3, which is improving water quality. Certainly that's one of the reasons we're here. Item 4, establishing town ordinances to help maintain water quality and implement stormwater runoff and BMPs. I'm not aware of specific ordinances that say this is the town ordinance for water quality protection. I mean, we probably have ordinances that maybe relate to junkyards and things like that, which indirectly you want to make sure your junkyards aren't next to your rivers. And in fact, thinking of a junkyard example, of course, is the Kelly's property, which I think the town acquired and had cleaned up and so on. So there's an example where having an ordinance, or in this case ownership by the town, you're certainly driven to make some improvements. I am aware that one of the things that came up in the original meeting with Plymouth way back in 2003, the planning board referenced concern about the amount of impervious surface that is allowed when houses are built or lots are developed and so on. And that's certainly a concern of the association as well. And there is reference, for example, in the zoning ordinance to maximum lot coverage by impervious surfaces. So on page 18 of your zoning ordinance, for example, there's a listing by zone of maximum lot coverage by impervious surfaces not to exceed 75%. And to me, that's a reflection of the fact that there's recognition that impervious surface is critical to water quality. Unfortunately, from our perspective, 75% is not acceptable, because most of the studies have shown that when you get impervious surfaces like pavement or roofs or whatever in excess of 20% in a development, you're going to see untoward or negative water quality impacts. So we'd like to see that over time looked at more closely. Even things like item 6, stormwater drainage and runoff controls. Most of our towns in the watershed obviously are rural. They don't have storm drains that are a problem. Well, town of Plymouth is large enough. We have a storm drain issue. We've got still some cross connection between our storm drains and our sewer system that the Water and Sewer Division is going to be dealing with the next upgrade. So the whole issue of stormwater drainage, what happens when runoff occurs off paved surfaces or whatever, happens throughout the watershed, and we're concerned that the local boards are focused on this issue. And I think the Plymouth Planning Board and zoning at least has recognized that runoff is an issue and have controls in place. So I see that as a positive thing. And again, some of these things are a review of what you already have, and if you are aware of things that you've also done since then, please let us know. One of the things that on the next item, the top of page 3, encouraging recreation, for example. One of the issues that was pointed out in the management plan, that public access points were an issue. In the case of the Baker River in Plymouth, we have the Fish and Game boat access facility. That essentially is a public access. It isn't the same as what's recommended in master plan, which is developing more access points in maybe a so-called Plymouth public swimming area somewhere on the Baker or Loon Pond or whatever. But at least you can say on the main stem of the Baker, we in Plymouth provide something through the Fish and Game access at the covered bridge site. And one of the projects that we're going to be working on next year is hopefully get information posted at these access sites up and down the watershed about not just, this happens to be a state-owned facility, but these other access points. Is always a conflict between riparian landowners or butters and the users. They may not really appreciate what they have. They'll trash the area up and so on. We want to make sure they reflect and give proper respect to the people that are providing the access. And another one, for example, under item 5, protecting wildlife and fish habitat. There is reference in the zoning ordinance, for example. Obviously, some of these things are done in consort with the Conservation Commission and so on, but the item was, local officials should use their authority to protect threatened and endangered wildlife through review of wetlands permits, again, from the Conservation Commission, forest applications, site plans, planning board, and intent to cut, which I think is the select board. So there's an opportunity there to look at, to be sensitive to wildlife concerns. And in the zoning ordinance is also a reference, actually we give extra points to folks that are proposing subdivisions if they can reserve valuable wildlife and environmental areas. There's an extra 10% bonus given to that process. So I see that as a recognition that there's a real benefit to protect wildlife through zoning controls. The last one, of course, is relative to the master plans. We recommended back in 2003 that the master plans, as they're updated by the individual towns, reflect or adopt the Baker River watershed plan as part of their master plan process. And I frankly have lost track of where we're at in Plymouth. We have a 2006 draft master plan that we worked with Burnt Rock Group on, right, Paul?
Yep.
Is that where it is still as a draft? Has it been adopted, or?
No, it got adopted.
The whole thing was adopted as it was proposed?
John, didn't the planning board vote on it?
I believe they did, yeah.
I was looking at the website today, and all I see was reference to the draft 2006, and I thought something had
I
happened.
have Miriam get back to you.
Okay.
I'm almost positive that they finally did have a vote on it.
Okay. So ideally, some of the things that we were talking about tonight were recognized in that master plan update and were incorporated into it. And other towns are working on their updates as well. So you can get a sense, again, with limited time we have here, 3 minutes left, as to who we are in general. It was one of the reasons we wanted to come before you, let you know who we are. We're here to protect the Baker River and its watershed. We want to give you folks an opportunity to provide any ideas or input that you might think of relative to in our efforts, or encouraging what we're doing, or telling us we're heading in the wrong direction, or whatever input you might want to give us. So I'll open it up for that.
Are you folks just interested in the actual route of the river in a small area, a small area on that abut the river? Because my biggest problem is everybody forgets about the mountains that surround us and hills that surround us. They allow all kinds of developments, and all kinds of slashing and cutting off all the timber and everything. And the water that comes basically into the Baker River is the water that comes off these hills. But there's an effort to just protect that one little valley down through that has the river, which probably is the end result and not the beginning result. So I don't know do you extend yourself all the way back into the...
Yes,
like,
and that's why we call ourselves the Baker River Watershed Association. We are representing and have an interest throughout the watershed. The reality, John, has been that since our formation in 2001, with a small number of volunteers, we have focused on bank erosion on the main stem of the river, the main channel. We've talked about doing more sampling, for example, in the watershed, going up the tributaries. We've done a little bit of that, but we're limited in terms of our budget to what we can do as it is. But we'd like to do more, and we certainly get comments from people like, what are you doing in my neck of the woods in the watershed? Well, unfortunately, you're right. We have tended to focus, from necessity mainly, to the main stem. But we hear horror stories too of logging activities that follow local streams that drain into the Baker River, and that's not acceptable. And that's why we hope that towns look at these intent to cuts and so on to address those kind of issues.
But I might add that we sample for conductivity in the mainstream, and we do not see a reflection of a lot of damage being done up in the higher elevations. That would show if a lot of soil was being disturbed and increasing the ions that would be flowing in. And the only time we see something like that is if we have a flood situation. But that you would expect, because it covers more land. Not necessarily land that's been slashed over, but just land, period.
In general, we're very fortunate to have good quality water. It's a Class B, legislatively mandated Class B water quality in the Baker River. And that's not to say we haven't had events that have driven it to less than B. And we certainly let Tom know when the E. coli standard doesn't meet swimming and so on. But I still think there are things that can happen in the watershed that we may not pick up because of the distance, as you say, down to where we actually monitor. And with only 13 monitoring points along the main stem, we got a lot of watershed that we probably are missing. Derek?
As far as intent to cut permits,
Yep.
Do you have any recommendations as far as wetlands wildlife inventory? How would we know? Is there any mechanism in place so we could see we could sort of have an inventory of what we could be impacting by signing.
Right. I know some of these things are pretty pro forma. It's just a request and you sign them. At least it gives you a heads up if there is an issue as to, you know, where these places are located. But I don't think any town, I don't know of any town that plots these, checks, kicks them to the conservation commissions if they exist, to see if they're aware of any need for a wetlands permit, because a lot of logging activities require wetlands permits for stream crossings.
The Conservation Commission generally gets a copy of the permit, and then they go out and look the situation over, of which I'm one in Wentworth.
Okay.
And I look it over to see that they're doing what they should be doing and not destroying the area.
Don't they make you build bridges and everything else over the streams?
If they have
They didn't
to.
used to,
Yeah.
but they do now.
They have to, actually, when they sign the intent to cut, they have to sign, it's a statement that I will follow the best management practices that the Department of Environmental Services expects them to follow. Because they just can't muddy up the streams. They can't run skidders through stream beds. Just isn't acceptable. There are some controls. But you're right, in terms of overseeing what we do, we sign off and we hope for the best. None of the boards that I'm aware of, you know, has somebody that runs out and checks intent to cuts. It's so before they sign off on them.
Doesn't the forester do that?
But there is. If there's complaint, then there's the forest rangers, I think, are responsible for checking on
I
it.
think
But
they check it anyway, whether there's
I
a
would hope
complaint or
so.
not.
But I don't know if there's what the basis is.
My other question is, how often do you run up against like commercial activities compared to natural activities? In other words, if somebody wants to come in and build along the Baker River, we have zoning that says we can do it, but in your eyes, you shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
So how much of that do you run into?
Well, we can see examples up along the Baker River throughout the 4 towns, in places that we say, how is that allowed? You know, so each of our towns have issues, and we have questioned the approval process, as it were. And again, most of the towns have no zoning, and so they may or may not have even an intent to build process in some of these towns. So it's a matter of somebody saying, well, wait a minute, there are certain minimum setbacks. In fact, as you probably know, the Comprehensive Shoreland Protection Act essentially sets a state overlay zone over all rivers up to a certain size of the rivers. And in the case of the Baker River, I think that pertains to the controls along the main stem all the way up to Wentworth. I think it's the Black Brook, which drains into the main stem, which comes out of Ore Hill Mine. So that is a 50-foot minimum setback. That's not to say, like the town of Plymouth has a minimum 75-foot setback for structures because of the environmentally sensitive zone. That would take precedence over the 50-foot. But there's still these controls that are in place. And, you know, you can only hope that somebody locally, planning board, zoning, or conservation commissioner checks on these and hopes they're okay. Thank you for your time. I know I'm up.
Thank you, Dick. Yeah, we have a public hearing
Right.
scheduled for 6:30, so we're going to continue
Appreciate
afterward.
everything.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Just one thing, if you have anything that you want to add to this, that we don't have time tonight, could you get that information to Dick so that we can look it over? Because, okay?
All right, thank you for coming.
Thanks again.
Chief?
One comment from Mr. Flanders.
Yes.
I work with the Forest Service, Forest Rangers, monitoring the 45 road. They want me to check quite a few of these cuts. If I see one where they disturb the water, I contact them and we work close together. So they are monitoring this
Good.
quite closely.
Glad to hear that. Great, thank you. All right,
We have a 6:30 public hearing, which is 5 minutes late, and I'd like to call that to order. It's on the proposed public safety complex, the second hearing on the concept of building a new facility for the police, remove the old building and start site work for a new fire station the following year. Should we have the chiefs bring us up to speed through the last committee meeting, and then we'll go from there.
I'd start with the chairman of the committee.
Pardon?
The chiefs can come up and have casino stuff.
Casino, can you start with the results of the last?
Anyway. Yeah.
Pretty quick.
I'll lend you that.
Geez, thanks. Okay. There hasn't been much time to do a whole lot, but we reviewed some other materials that we had. As you're going to hear from the police chief, he's got a proposal for the building. I'm going to go talk with the Bowen Corporation as far as what they can do. They did a real nice job with the Meredith Station to see what they can offer for us and for how much. I have all the drawings from years past and everything to go down, just kind of let them have a look-see. So with that, and we're trying to get RFPs written for the proposed excavation cost of what we want to do out there at that site. So right now, we've got a lot of stuff going on, but we haven't had a lot of answers come back on that stuff. But I believe next.
Yeah, we have a meeting tomorrow.
We have a meeting tomorrow, correct?
3:30.
When are you going to meet with the Bowen?
It's supposed to be tomorrow. Beforehand. Before the meeting.
Where's the site work?
I believe I had contact with Mr. Piper for the life-size plan, so that we'd have that to send that out with it.
Okay.
That's about.
Chief, where's Chief Temporary? There he is. Do you have any inputs for this, for the public?
Do you want me to go over this?
Yeah, I briefly show what you have in mind for, this is the Littleton Police Station design.
Yeah, back in September, myself, Captain LaFave, Paul Freitas, and Brian Murphy had gone up to take a look at Littleton. Littleton has just completed this facility, just under 10,000 square feet for under $2 million. The facility is very attractive. I think it would suit our needs with some fine tuning. Tomorrow, a representative from Sumner Davis Architects will be coming to our committee meeting to talk about their work here and how they could help us out as well. I also have a tentative telephone call into the contractor. They couldn't make it tomorrow, but they are also interested in having a conversation with us as well. This footprint is adequate for us. There are a couple nuances or a couple minor nips and tucks that we should probably do to this building, but this footprint clearly would fit our needs for quite some time. I believe there's a handout on the table out back which briefly talks about or illustrates the proposed Littleton facility. Also has on the next page has the proposal right next to our current facility. And then on the next page, we're looking at where we currently are right now. We can compare where we are and where we think we should be. And the last page is also a site plan of where we are in the existing facility as well.
So the contractor is going to be at the meeting tomorrow.
The contractor will not. The
architect
will. The contractor cannot make it tomorrow, but is very willing to have a conversation with us. The architect will.
So the site's been decided on. We've got to get the RFQs for the site work, which should come within the next couple of weeks.
Right.
And we're going to attempt to harden up the conceptual, the building designs, and come to some sort of a budgeted price level. All right. That said, is there any public? Yeah, we're going to have, I want to keep the comments to 3 minutes, and we'll open it up to the floor. Does anyone want to speak? Frank?
Yeah, I'm looking at the second page of the proposal layout of the facility. This being a concept, what I see, what I would look at is your driveway, you have an entryway that goes all the way into the back where the police vehicles will be parked. And then the arrows show going through the sally port, which would be a controlled access facility. What you need is to have a road that goes all the way around and out the other side of the south end of the property, so that if you had to, obviously the police had to respond to an emergency call, they would not have to drive all the way around and through the front part of the building. In other words, on that second sheet, you've got parking back here, police cars here, this is visitor parking, this is one way this way, one way, two-way traffic here. This should have a road all the way around the side here, so your flow of traffic would keep going all the way around. And that way, if the police have to respond quickly, they just go right out here, and you don't have a conflict of, because on that, you've got an arrow showing one way in, and the only one way out is on the south side. So you should have a road complete your circle of traffic flow all the way around.
Anyone else have any comments? Mr. Sansucci.
What is the functional life of this building that we're proposing?
Yeah, go ahead.
That will all depend on what materials we put into that building.
Right, no, that I understand, that's why I was asking the question. I mean,
At this point, it's a concept, and we haven't got into the details, so it would be pretty hard to tell. And then anyway, it would be pretty hard to tell no matter what, because I've seen 200-year-old wooden buildings as well as 50-year-old brick buildings fall down. So it's hard to tell what the exact life would be, or even the functional life of actual life.
I think the building is designed to meet the reasonable growth expectations of the town over the next 20, 25 years.
If I could just add to that, I think the current footprint of this building, roughly 10,000 square feet plus or minus, is quite adequate for the police department for 15 or so years, maybe even 20. If that was the question, if we're asking the question, how long is the building designed to exist before it falls apart, I think that's a factor of what you use for materials, like Mr. Kelly said.
Yeah, and the length of time before the building falls apart is a factor of how well it's maintained over the years. And I think the major issue is the building adequate to meet, say, the next 15 or 20 years' growth in the town?
And 25-year projection is 7,000 people, so 7,000 minus the college. This could maintain that. Yeah.
I don't know if we have a 7,000 population growth in, what, 20 years?
5 years, and 7,000.
What's the growth been of the town over the past 20 years?
I don't know.
500?
But, I was using Littleton as a comparison. The Littleton police chief and I have same ideas on how long his building will be useful for his community before it needs to be expanded. And he seems to think, as I do, that the footprint for 20 years is reasonable, to think that that building probably wouldn't need to get any bigger for a while.
Well, and the site work is going to leave some room for expansion. Not an awful lot, but some.
We're talking about preparing a 2-acre size area. That should be very sufficient. The Littleton facility is located on about 1.37 acres, which for them right now is fine. Although they have the benefit of when they want to expand, their lot is already flat all around. So we're proposing that we should probably be looking at preparing an area about 2 acres for this project.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Sansucci.
If I could ask the chief, or the board, whoever might have the answer. It looks like the sally port, is this like a garage?
It is a garage, yeah, it's
closed in.
It's closed in. The proposal, this sally port, you can drive in and out from both directions. Our current one, which I think is on, you can only go in and out from one direction. We can fit comfortably 2 cars. You could probably fit up to probably 6 in here. It's used to bring prisoners in and out of the building. It also can keep our cars out of the weather during extreme weather as well, and to store things like our radar trailer and other equipment as well.
Good. No, it makes sense. You needed it for a long time.
Mr. Wood?
Where's all our ambulances gonna go?
Not a police
That's the
station.
fire department.
Wrong building, John.
Where are the ambulances going to go?
Right now, 42 Island Street.
They're gonna be part of the police, or?
No, they'd be the fire department. As Casino said, that right now, it'd be on 42 Highland Street.
Technically, they're gonna be right beside it, right?
What do you mean?
In your concept, your new fire station is gonna be beside the police station, right?
Yeah.
Overall, you gotta look
But
at
we
the
still, we're not going to tear down the 42 Highland Street.
You're not?
No, not at this stage of the game.
No, not until you,
Well, we're not going to tear it down, that's the plan. So it will be used by the town, probably the fire department, for the foreseeable future, for there'll be some usage. Mr. Hool.
Looking at the Littleton plan, it's all, the footprint and the structure is all on 1-story level. For energy conservation and economy of construction and more effective utilization of the site, which is a difficult site to work with, based on what your comments have been in the past about the site, why are we not considering a 2-story structure to reduce the footprint and to gain the construction advantages of a 2-story rather than a sprawling 1-story, and to make better utilization of the site initially and for future potential growth?
At this point in time, I think the 1-story, because of the sally port and the other features of the building, is more desirable, but I'm not sure. Have we considered a 2-story?
We really haven't considered a 2-story building, and I only know of a few multiple-story buildings. They're the larger agencies. I know Meredith has a 2-story building. It's a very large building. And the committee has just never discussed that concept. I know that with a 2-story building, you would be required to have an elevator, which is something that you need to consider. And there are some costs involved with there as well too. And there are probably some energy efficiencies with a multiple-story building, I'm assuming, but I think for where we're going for our community, I like the simplicity of the 1-story building. I'm looking at it from a managerial standpoint. I don't care to have some people upstairs and some people downstairs. I think supervisors and managers like to be closer to their people so they can interact at a different level. I think this floor plan would suit our agency better than multiple stories. We just never considered it for those kinds of reasons.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of the footprint, how much of the parking lot and the footprint for the building, how much beyond that we're going to go with the site work, but there's going to be some room for expansion on a single level with what we're going to do.
If we clear a 2-acre space today, we won't need that 2-acre space, but we will have that for the future. Like I said, Littleton You have a 10,000 square foot building roughly. It's occupying with the parking lot and their exterior or exterior storage, I think it's occupying 1.3 acres. So we're going to have 2 acres available to us, which would seem plenty for the future.
Yeah, it looks like, just a rough idea of this site, you're probably talking about 3/4 of an acre is going to be occupied by the initial construction.
By the building.
The building and the parking lot. What's the building, 10,000 square feet?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hool.
This is a building size for the Littleton Department. What is the floor size for Littleton compared to Plymouth?
Roughly about the same. I think they're 11, we're 10. So that's a very comparable standard. You can see right here they have enough area for 10 workstations. They also have enough space for supervisors. So they also have detectives. So their staffing is similar to ours. Some of the things that Littleton never does that we do often is we, at least twice a year, ramp up for major events. We go into mass arrests at least twice a year. We have activities in our community that cause us to have our entire agency on alert sometimes for certain events, athletically based. So we'd have to, have areas where we could handle those things. Currently, if you look at our existing model, we use our training room as our mass booking area. You can see our training room is rather big right now. We use that. It's probably the biggest room in our existing plan. We could still use this model, but I think what we would probably do is use a portion of the Sally Port as a mass booking area instead of having to use this smaller area, which is, it's really, during a mass arrest scenario, you really don't want to be bringing all those people into this inner area of the facility. You want to keep them out here close to your detention areas, which is what we're doing right now with our current building.
Mr. Hool.
Just an observation of this single floor plan. The Sally Port is on the ground level and certainly would have to remain on this ground level. The first block of space is primarily storage and general evidence and other facilities that are not administrative necessarily in nature. If you look from the corridor in the center of that structure to the right, that entire administrative package could probably be situated right on top of that lower activity as laid out in this Littleton drawing.
You mean these right here?
Yes.
Well, actually, it really can't, because this area has a public interface.
Yeah.
People come into the building and they either talk with our communication personnel or admin staff. So if to locate this on an upper floor, there wouldn't be any way for the public to talk with people as they come in the station.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that you would put that on the second floor. You could rearrange that space in the entry area that's now identified as lobby to house that administrative function. But all of the other functions associated with that block of space, managerially and administratively, could be grouped together on a second floor.
Mr. Chairman. Chief, how different is, what areas in this plan were not discussed in the old Turner Group plan? In other words, were there a lot more offices and things like that on the second floor of the old Turner plan? Or was the Turner plan basically a one-story building with maybe sleeping quarters up above and stuff like that? So I don't think that we're changing the concept of having it all on one floor now any more than we did when we were working.
That's true. I have the Turner files right in my file here. The only upstairs in the Turner plans were bunkhouses, and I believe there may have been casino. How many was there? A training room there, or just bunkhouses?
Bunkhouses and showers.
Yeah, bunkhouses and showers.
Because the training was down.
Right,
on the first
and
floor.
it would seem to make sense to have the showers near the bunkhouses. And the bunkhouses were primarily designed for firefighting personnel,
Right.
but they could have been used for police personnel who are held over or whatever. But we don't bunk in at the police station. So there's really, for our size department, the culture of our organization, I think one floor suits our needs very well, and will for a long time.
Can I ask the chief some questions?
You may.
I have follow-up questions too. Every time I go up by the police station, I see town police cars, 4 or 5, but I see 6, 7, sometimes 8 state cruisers which are using our facility. Approximately how much of the time, chief, do the state use our facility?
Every day.
Every day? You don't have any hours a day?
No, but they're in there every day.
Do they have a specific area, or are they allowed to roam wherever they want?
They can use our facility like any other agency can.
Are they paying rent?
No.
Are they offering to add to this plan where they have their own section where they come in and do their own business outside of the police?
No.
Or do you have to be together to talk and all? I'm just thinking, we're supporting the state troopers. We're getting absolutely nothing out of them that I can see. So they should be paying a little bit of rent or kicking in for a new design where they're sort of separate. There's a lot of advantages of having the state police here and using the facility, but they're getting carte blanche, and it's not right.
I don't know how you deal with something like that. That would be fairly involved.
Kick them out. That's how you deal with it.
And you wouldn't be able to eat breakfast at Lovey's. You'd all be down there.
The rest of my life.
We enjoy a very good relationship with the state police and the sheriff's department and the liquor commission and Fish and Game and all of our neighboring law enforcement agencies, because we have to. We cannot do this job without them. I have never been given a bill from the state police or the sheriff's department when they send me 20 or 30 troopers for an entire weekend. I'm never given a bill when we have a complicated investigation or a traffic accident reconstruction that we don't have the expertise to do. In fact, we ask the state police to handle things for us, several times a year, and the answer is always yes, and we've never received a bill. And I just kind of think that with something like this, to provide outside agencies a space, this is what they're really getting here, is a space. It's a good thing to do professionally. It helps us to maintain connections and well, I think I've answered the question. I think the relationship right now is very important and we need to maintain it.
Is that pretty much the standard operating procedure with other departments?
It's the norm throughout the state, pretty much. Of course, it's always centered on your hub areas,
Yeah.
your busy areas.
Mike?
Yes, follow up on the rationale for a second floor. This would be a question that you'd ask the architect to give you a cost of a potential expansion at the 30-year service life extension program for this building. But right now, your cost for a second floor is going to have a major impact for ADA and life safety compliance issues that won't justify usability of the facility. And so single floor as an initial build is probably the right way to go. But if he's meeting with the architect, it wouldn't be a bad question to ask them what would the design, the initial design and engineering of this facility allow for service life extension add-ons or going up a floor, just to see what your cost factor would be.
Mr. Sansucci.
I want to go back to the Turner plan, I guess, and just an observation, and if my recollection is correct, the reason for the safety complex itself was economies of scale, not only in heat and electricity, but also in utilization of space, where, for example, showers for men and women, for the firefighters or the police officers, you could utilize the same shower facilities. Meeting rooms, you could use the same meeting rooms when they weren't, one or the other could use the same meeting rooms. So there was some economies of scale that this building here, by itself alone, will not offer. We have no idea what the overall cost of heating a building like this is going to be, or we have no idea of what heating a building that the Turner Group had proposed was going to cost the community, as well as the lights. So I think to me, there's a lot of unanswered questions that really need to be answered before we say this is the best plan, or another one might be the best plan. We're taking them separately here, and I understand that. But I think you actually have to look at the whole process, meaning what are we talking about? We're talking actually a fire department and the police department. That's what we're really talking about, right, that the town needs. And therefore, if there's a way that we can gain economies of scale by doing the two of them together, it makes sense to look in that avenue. I mean, that would be my thinking anyway. Now, has any consideration been given to that? I mean, I'm not saying the Turner plan was the best plan. I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, at this stage, I think the reason we've decided to go this way is the site is, we have a reverse situation. The police department, had we been fortunate enough to have it on the south side of the present site, then this whole thing would be a little bit different. But I think the idea is to build a police department, move it, and then start the fire department, because the police department fits better on it just doesn't fit where it fits much better on the south side of the lot than it does on the north. And the site work would be considerably less for the fire department. So I think that's why we're where we are. I don't know. I think if you look at the heating costs and electrical costs of two new buildings, I'm not too sure that the savings wouldn't be significant, even if they're separate, compared to what we're paying today for the present facilities. Yes, John, you.
What we have come to decide is that we could go forever. What if, why would it be maybe better than the other? We've got to come to some kind of a plan and discuss it, find out what the cost is, and find out if the people of Plymouth want that particular plan. If they do, that's fine. If they don't, then we can start again. But we could have plans that would paper this whole room and come up with what if and what it should have been and it might have been and everything else. So this is why we're trying to, and we're going to have other public meetings so that if the other majority of the public want to come and discuss it, then we can, that's why we're having these meetings, so that we can hash a lot of this stuff out. But we've got to come up with some type of a defined plan as to what we're doing and find out if the people of Plymouth want.
Well, the economies that we're talking about by doing it this way are significant. We're probably looking at saving $500,000 or $600,000 in site work. And I think I'll probably quote Patrice at the last meeting. She said, you know, we've got to get something started. This has been going on for so long that we've got to get a program underway. Yes, sir.
Well, I don't disagree it needs to be done, but I think the important thing is to do the right thing when you do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense just to throw any old thing up. I mean, what's up on Highland Street is exactly what happened, and it's lasted a good long time, thank God for that. But that was an afterthought, more or less, I would say. The other thing to answer what Mr. Kelly had to say about the site and so on and so forth, this is a pretty big piece of land.
Yeah.
An awful big piece of land.
A lot of it's vertical, that's the problem.
Right, it'll take a pretty good sized building.
Yeah.
And there's no lot line problems here because we own both pieces.
Right.
So theoretically, we could set it back some and we could build a building still on that site without disturbing the police station that exists right now, possibly. I don't know.
Well,
I'm just throwing these out now to...
We looked at some estimates to do site work behind the present police department, and it was in a $600,000-$700,000 range. 800. To go behind the present police department and put the fire department there. And I think the approach we had is that the footprint for the police department will more easily fit on the southern, there'll be a lot less site work. And what's left over will accommodate the fire department pretty much as needed. So, Mr. Wood.
What bothers me is that Plymouth is coming to crunch time.
You said
You've got $3 million, which will probably end up $6 million at the elementary school. You've got water and sewer that's going to affect the population with the new treatment plant for both water and sewer. You've got a police station, you've got a fire station, and when all this hits, you're going to probably see a mass exodus to the poorhouse out of Plymouth. My problem is you're quoting $800,000 to get a site ready up there. The last I heard, the cornfield was for sale for $800,000.
Yeah, the mitigation for flood control at the corn.
Flood control.
Well, you're still talking.
Why do we keep bringing it up when it don't mean a thing?
Well, I don't know.
Hasn't been a flood here for how long? And all the time in that field, they've proven that there was never any problem with flooding in that field.
But the plan to build over there has how much? What's the amount of fill they're talking about? 800,000 yards or something? It's a lot of dirt.
So? Yeah.
Well, the point is, whatever site we have, we own this site.
Yeah.
If we go and buy another site, and by the time we get it ready to put a building for both departments or two buildings for each department, we're still going to end up with $1 million site, no matter what we do. This is still the most economical approach, and the location of this facility, particularly the fire department, as I understand, as long as we maintain 42 Highland with 1946 pumper, we're going to have, the rate will not change for anyone right now, the existing town, and we will improve the rate for a large section of the town by moving the main station out on the Baker Valley. So, if somebody's got a better idea for a site that we can acquire and have ready in a reasonable period of time, I'd sure love to hear it, but so far I haven't seen anything.
You've got the same 4 people that were here for the last 2 public meetings.
Right.
Which means the people don't give a damn about the fire department and police department.
Well, we'll find out at town meeting. I mean, the water district spent $6 million with 22 people at the meeting, and nobody blinked an eyelash. Huh?
And half of them couldn't vote.
No, 22 people voted to spend $6 million. I was there. That's how many people
I was there too, and I didn't
qualified to
count
vote.
22 people because there were 22 people won't fit in that room.
Well, they said there was 22 votes, and it was $6 million.
Stuff in the ballot box, I'll tell you that.
All they know is what I read in the paper.
I know, well, don't take that to be true.
Anyone else have any comments? Mr. Houle.
Well, again, I echo the comments that Paul made with regard to the economy of scale in the combination of the fire department and the police department as it was originally envisioned. And at the last public hearing on this subject, you allowed that there was still the possibility of considering a common facility for both police and fire at the location that you're contemplating. I would submit that in order to get a better understanding of what conceptually is envisioned here, that you do, one, as you had said at the last public meeting, you would look at that option as to its feasibility on that site, even though the whole structure might not be constructed initially, that it could be constructed in 2 parts or 2 phases, and yet joined together as a common facility to share certain aspects of the space that is needed by both departments. And I again would say that it is essential that you take into consideration a second-story option, because you're looking at a structure that should be good for at least 50 years. I've been in this town nearly 20 years, and the department has resided where it is for that 20 years without any alteration substantially to the building. This building's major cost is going to be its annualized cost year over year for the next 50 years. Energy is not going to get any cheaper going forward. Space is not going to be any cheaper to maintain going forward. So to the extent that space can be consolidated and shared in a 2-phase construction on that site, with the provisions for that second phase taken into consideration in the design for the first phase, this town could be much money better off than to go with 2 separate sprawling facilities.
I'd like to disagree with that, Mr. Chairman. You have 2 forces that have very different functions. One's function is outside of the building, and the other one's they're based out of that building. And so it's sort of like having a household where one person needs to be in there all the time and the other one needs to be outside all the time. You have the potential, you can specialize the cost, energy costs more. This way, I think, I stand behind the chief's efforts because you know, a police station can be kept cooler, for example. Sections of it can be kept a whole lot cooler. The fire station, same thing. There are different sections that are used in different ways, so I think the separation makes a lot more sense.
Well, I also think if we get into a single facility, it's going to probably increase the site work significantly, $200,000-300,000, plus the fact we would find ourselves closing down the police department for some period of time, which would be temporary relocation of communications gear and all that sort of thing.
Just a minute. I agree with Mr. Brown. There are two missions, and I have had an extensive amount of time going to a lot of these police stations and safety complexes. I've visited 6 of them, and about every one that had a safety complex are having serious second thoughts about it. In fact, there was 1 or 2 that said that it was the worst mistake they ever made, because basically, even though our forces get along quite well now, they do have different missions, they have different hours, they have different everything, and there can be animosity that are starting to poke their heads up. So we can't just think of the money or even the efficiency. We've got to think of the working relationship between these 2 departments, and if they don't get along, I don't care how beautiful a building you're going to build, you're going to have not the efficiency work-wise as you would if you have stations that the actual occupants are happy with.
Mr. Sansucci.
Well, that's a management problem, so I'll just forget about that part of it. I hear, I think. I haven't heard anybody say, I know yet. I'm waiting for you to tell me what you really know. Because the whole idea of this meeting is for us to give you the input that we have. And you obviously to give us your input as well. I'd really like to know how the building would fit on the lot if it was a two-story building. I'd really like to know what the economies of scale are, if in fact there are any. There may be none, I don't know. But those are the questions that I would like to have answered, because as Bill said, if we're talking a 50-year building here, energy's not getting any cheaper. We're gonna have some concerns down the road. I mean, we had that police department up there. We thought things were going to go honky-dory for a long time. Well, we see we need another police department, obviously. I know the fire department's horrendous. I mean,
well, the police department is an old building that's, you know,
with the old sports car place.
Right, it's inefficient and everything else.
I don't disagree with you.
We could spend $1 million trying to fix it up, and I don't know if we wouldn't.
And I'm not suggesting that either, Charlie.
No.
What I'm suggesting is we should make Darmo sure.
I mean, at this point in time, I'd say that the board and the building committee has decided that there will be 2 separate facilities on this site on North Main Street, or on the Baker Valley, because we own the property. There are no alternatives that are less cost-effective or more cost-effective. And there's a lot of good reasons to move the fire department out there and keep the police where they are in a new building. So I'd say if you want to know what I know and what I believe is going to happen is exactly that. As long as town meeting agrees to spend the $5 million.
Well, that really isn't all the questions. I mean, I gave you a list of the questions. Yeah. How much are we going to save in economies of scale? Not only in lights and heat possibly, but also in utilization of space over the next 50 years. Those are the kind of projections that people make when they're going to build a huge building, or they're looking out for the best interest of the community, in my mind anyway. But that's neither here nor there. You've given me the answers that you can give me, and I appreciate that.
Anyone else? Steve?
Paul, I know this is a very reasonable thing to do for the police department. I know that. I've been on this committee for a very long time, as you know, maybe 13 years. I know that having a 2-story building with having supervisors or admin people upstairs and downstairs will not work well for our organization. I know that. In my mind, that's a fact. I know where there are other facilities that are 2 floors. They're bigger than us. Lebanon, I think, is the only facility in this county that has 2 floors. Lebanon's a city. We're probably never going to be a city when anyone in this room is alive. Okay? So this makes a lot of sense for us. It really does. It makes a lot of sense for us now, and it's going to make a lot of sense for us in 20 years. I know that, or at least I believe that.
Mr. Holt.
I understand your position, and I respect that, Chief, as to this layout and your present needs. But from the standpoint of community cost and sustaining operational cost related to that facility over a 50-year period, that is a major consideration in what we choose to do as a community going forward. And management can package itself in a 2-story structure to be just as functionally efficient and effective as it can in a 1-story structure. There's no doubt in my mind about that in terms of managing your department and the size of the department that it is. The consideration here is what the life cycle cost of this facility is going to be to the town. And if we can couple the 2 facilities to share certain space between the 2, again, that is a cumulative saving over 50 years that is very, very substantial. And life cycle cost is something that I'm not hearing anything said about.
Well, life cycle cost, if you're talking 50 years,
yes,
you're talking about probably a maintenance expense over 50 years will equal the cost of the building. if the building's going to last 50 years or more. I mean, take any house in town that's 100 years old, and I can guarantee you it's been gutted 20 times in the last 100 years. So I don't see how you can, the consolidate, the one building concept versus two is something that we will evaluate. I think we've got front-end costs that are probably far in excess of what anything we'd save in energy over 50 years. Just the front-end cost for site work of putting both buildings together. But we'll look at that at our next committee meeting and come back with a recommendation based on what we find out. But as I say, the 50-year thing is to me, they're in a building in town that can't last 50 years regardless of how well it was constructed, depending on how it's maintained over the 50-year period. I think the reason the 42 Highland Street facility is such a wreck is that for the better part of 15 years, it wasn't maintained at all.
Well, that's the unfortunate result of governing board priorities over the years, and that's water over the dam. But looking ahead, and I come back to the issue about the space and how you heat the space and so forth, with today's heating and ventilating technologies, you can heat that space any way you want to serve the occupancy needs, whether it's for 8 hours, whether it's for 24 hours, whether it's for some other interval of time or arrangement. Heating and ventilating technology is such that that space can be managed anyway, energy-wise, far better than any structure that has gone before us in today's...
And I'd rather have that chief as superintendent of that building manage that for his line
I really
item.
don't disagree with a lot of things you were saying, but what I'm trying to say is, for our community, for the size of our department,
At this point in
this
time.
is what's working. I mean, if you look at the positions of people in this department, there may be only 2 people who would be practical to have upstairs. Would be the chief of police and the second in command. Everyone else would need to be on the downstairs, because everyone else, for the most part, needs to be going in and out of the building on a regular basis or has interactions with the public every day, multiple times a day. We're not an organization that has a lot of people that sit at their desks and work with computers all day long. It's not like that. There's a lot of in and out of our building. Our agency is just not that large at this point, and I don't see it growing that quickly. I mean, if we were to having this discussion 30 years from today, maybe, but I don't see it. Not until our community is the size of Laconia or Lebanon or Manchester. These are the places that have multi-floor buildings. And they're new buildings, too.
I think we ought to just, we'll cut the conversation off with a comment that at the next meeting, which is tomorrow, we will review all of these questions of one building versus two, the maintenance and heating costs, and then at our next public hearing, we'll come back with answers.
Are we going to have a public meeting, or are we going to have an informative meeting?
Well, it's an information, so we can't have a public hearing until we get to the numbers.
Mr. Chairman, we had discussed, there's a significant cost for us to have public hearings. So we had discussed at the meeting that at every selectmen's meeting here forward, we will have on the agenda an update.
It'll be a public hearing, but it'll be an update on the...
It won't be, it'll be an informative hearing of an update of where we're at until we feel we need another public hearing.
With a warrant article with some dollar.
But it will be a regular agenda item from now on. There might not be anything to add that night, or...
So with that, let's just say we'll talk about, the next committee meeting, we'll discuss this and resolve the committee's position on these issues. Mr. Wood.
Could I just ask who's on that committee?
Pardon?
Could I ask who's on that committee?
The two chiefs.
Miriam Bader.
Myself.
Miriam Bader. Brian Murphy.
Paul, me, John Kelly.
Dick Piper.
Dick Piper.
Tim Keefe.
That's about it.
Mark McGlone.
Mark McGlone.
Mark McGlone.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, we will call the end of the public hearing and move on to the financial officer, Amy Cole, on the life insurance company comparison plan.
I believe you each got a sheet that looks like this.
I don't know.
Yeah, we do. It's not one.
It's been a while since we have really reviewed our life insurance costs. It's a fairly small line item, so it kind of gets overlooked.
I'm not sure I got it.
It's in there somewhere, Charlie.
It's in the bottom. Somewhere. Paper. Talk about a paperless society. Never have. I got the turkey trot. That's it. Thank you.
Copy. You can take mine. I've looked at it pretty well.
I got a number of phone calls from an agent that wanted to talk to me about life insurance. So I gave them the information they needed to do the quotes. And I also talked to the local government center to see what they could do for us, because we're not currently through them. And I was a little surprised by what came back, pleasantly, because one of the quotes came in at 25% less than what we're currently paying, and another came in at 26% less than what we're currently paying. Both are with reputable companies that we've actually heard of, which is kind of exciting. So we know that there's somebody that's got a good reputation and handles their claims properly and is going to treat our employees with respect. Oddly,
Term life?
This is term life. It's $50,000 of coverage with a $50,000 accidental death and dismemberment clause. The short-term disability is a 26-week program. They replace 66.67 or 2/3 of your weekly pay up to a maximum of $1,000. There is a 5 calendar day waiting period. So if you go out on Tuesday, they don't start paying until Sunday, kind of thing. It's which is yes. This is for, you know, if you're out with surgery, you have to have your appendix out and you're out of work for 2 or 3 weeks recovering, this would kick in. If you have a car accident, because obviously I don't know anybody that can afford to not have their wages in place.
So this is term life and work, or
short-term disability.
Disability.
Mr. Chairman, before we go too far and get too complicated, it's exactly what we have now.
Yeah, this is exactly
25% less.
Yeah, it's exactly the same coverage as we're currently providing to employees, just less expensive.
Do we have to lock into the company?
No.
So that means every year we can check.
The rates are guaranteed for 2 years, and at which point they recommend that you review them anyway. The cost would go up slightly because the short-term disability rate is based on how much people make. So it's like 30 cents, give or take, per $10 of wage.
Interesting. LGC is the most expensive. That's the government center insurance policy.
Yeah.
This is a result. I had mentioned that we were going to check into every contract that we have in the town hall and for the municipalities. This was a result of one of them.
Slouch company, so we know they're not going to go away.
They're a known entity. They're offering us a mirror plan to what we have.
You want to vote on this?
You would have to.
I think we to move to Mutual of Omaha. That's your preference.
I make a motion that we move to Mutual of Omaha.
$15,462.60 versus our current level of $20,894.28. Second?
Second.
We have a motion to move to Mutual of Omaha, which has been seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There you go.
Thank you. I'll get that started.
That was easy. You're a lot easier than these other guys.
Well, I'm not trying to spend money, I'm trying to save it.
All right. Back to the agenda. All right, do we have any public comment? Mr. Wood?
Does anybody know when the time capsule is going to be open?
I don't know what you're talking about, but you want us to open it tomorrow. What do you know's in there?
I don't know what's in there, but I've heard that the high school put a time capsule in, and I'm not, and I think the town did, but I'm not
How
sure.
long ago?
I think it was 1950, Joe.
It's been a long time, I don't,
Where?
well, it's supposed to be open in 100 years. Well, it's supposed
Where
to
is
be-
the time capsule,
I
John?
don't know if anybody knows.
Oh, well, that's going to eliminate the problem of how we're going to open it.
Well, you could go back in your records.
That's what I just think there should be an update on it, that's all.
Ask some of the old times.
They're all dead.
Even if you don't know, John, who does?
Hey, I said ask the old timers.
Okay.
Is somebody gonna check? I don't know where you check.
I don't know. We'll find out.
I guess that would be me.
Yeah, you're it.
Committee of one to
Hold on.
locate that.
Locate the time capsule and
I
let
thought
us
I might
know.
have put one in at the bicentennial, when they had the bicentennial, 60, I can't remember what it was.
Now, what time is the parade start? That's
Formation's at 10,
10 o'clock at the Armory,
parade kicks off at 10:30,
right?
breakfast starts around 8:30.
Short speech
For
by the
participants.
chairman of the board and
Hopefully we'll
followed
have
by, who
have-
else?
Have some selectmen there.
Who else is going to give us a speech?
At 8:30,
I know you.
10 o'clock, Jeff.
Wednesday morning?
Yeah.
We've got one confirmed speaker, and that would be you right now.
That's it? My goodness.
We have asked a couple of other people.
Should I give my speech about the war to end all wars? Just to show that nobody really knows what they're talking about?
Just don't start a new one.
All right. Do we have any non-public issues?
Yes.
John?
Just so you might know that not a lot of people do. Wilbur Filbert was one of the first people to land on Normandy Beach, and he lived through it. And I think he died, 5-6 years ago. One son's living, one son, Leslie Filbert, was killed on 93. And Francis Potter, who was Eddie Potter's brother, was disputed to be the first person killed in World War II. Now, some other people claimed it, but I was told by Eddie too, that before he died, that he was the first one killed in World War II. And they're both from Plymouth, and we got a Medal of Honor winner, so we've been a lot of firsts when it came to
How old your
this
father
question.
be if he were still here?
What was that?
How old would your father be if he were still around 88, 89?
Same as my father.
All right. There being no further comments, I would entertain a motion. Well, we want to go into non-public, right? We have a non-public under RSA 91-A:3, comma, Roman numeral 2A and C, personnel. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, we're in non-public.